Right around the world, beautiful black faces are gracing the covers of most high-end fashion magazines. Is this a marketing gimmick or a sign of real change? This is The Fix, where we also dig into trends and all the cool stuff people are talking about here in South Africa. Joining me is a fashion show director and former model, Andiswa Manikama, and of course also model Iman Mkwanazi. Good evening, ladies. Welcome to the program.
Good evening. Thank you for having us.
Peter, of course, is also joining us in this conversation.
Lucky me.
These covers are very, very unusual. The big question on my mind, let me start with you, Andiswa, is this a gimmick, or is this finally making business sense for people in the magazine business?
I think it actually is finally making business sense. In the fashion business, there is change. Black beauty is finally being embraced because I think black women are finally starting to also believe in their own beauty and embracing it, and we're starting to embrace it ourselves.
Iman, you've graced covers, you've been part of brands. This has not always been the case.
Yes.
I mean, this is highly, highly unusual. And I'm going to come back to that same question. Is it a black moment? Is it a prop? Is it stuff that people realize they need to do because the world is more diverse? A lot of arguments used to be made about what the value is going to be of putting a black face on a magazine. And the first question was always, or the first answer was that nobody's going to buy it or we're going to lose sales. Is that still a real case? Is that still an argument?
I actually blame it on digitalization, social media. Back then, there were no black women to say, no, this cover, I'm supposed to grace this cover, or this is black beauty, or these are black trends. So right now, we have more black women saying, this is appropriation if editors go out of their way to put something that's black on their covers. Black women are now speaking out, and they have their own platforms. We've built our own platforms and said, this is who we are, so you can't ignore us anymore.
I've been looking at your social media presence. I mean, you've got 10,000 followers on, Twitter alone, thousands on Instagram. And Iswa, the same thing, with you. You went from being a model, of course, you're a casting director now. You're getting into the business of it. The spaces that are opening for black women, not just as covers, but also as real movers and shakers behind the scenes. How different is it, from being in front of the camera to making the decisions now about who goes on? And does it help that more black women are, in fact, doing the casting?
I wouldn't say there's a lot of black women doing the castings. Of course, it's different. Sitting on the other side of the coin, it's very interesting. I was privileged to be trained by a very, very specific man, Jan Malan, who was always very decisive. So doing what I do is, so when I compare it to modeling, I always put myself in the model's shoes. So I know exactly what models go through sitting at a casting, but at the same time, I feel like, especially South African models, if I may put it that way, I feel like they do not have the drive, the urge to say, I want it. And this is now the difference. If I compare South African models and African models as a whole, like models from Nigeria, models come from all over the continent to come to South Africa, and they come and they know I'm here to work.
Peter, I haven't forgotten about you. I'm going to bring you in. But Iman, do you agree with what Andiswa has said?
I do agree with it, but at the same time, modeling in South Africa isn't a big career. So you find that models end up having other jobs, or say for my instance, I went and studied a science degree and I'm in business. But so we can't really be very motivated and driving into something that doesn't actually give you an income. because there's bills to play. You know, there's so much expenses that have come up in the past few years that models can't actually just invest in just modeling. They have to look at other aspects, which I suppose is a whole South African industry problem more than a model problem.
Now, of course, there we see you doing, you know, a whole range of things, Iman. I mean, you've become a businesswoman. You've become someone that's involved in community projects. So you're diversifying. And, you know, on that point of diversifying, let me bring Peter in. Peter, we've been in the business of magazines, newspapers, the media. It's a hell of a business to be in the advent of technology. It's been such a disruptor. It's changed everything. From where you're sitting, I mean, what does this look like to you? Does this look to you like sound business sense?
Absolutely, no, absolutely. I mean, Iman makes the point that social media is forcing this kind of thing on magazines, right? Because people are developing their own voice. And I remember when we were at Business Day together, we used to produce a magazine called Wanted. I don't know whether either of you have appeared in it or on its cover. But we were very early sort of trendsetters by using black models. And I remember the first editors of Wanted magazine were desperately keen to find black faces and black models to use, and they photographed beautifully, and some of the layouts we didn't wanted were cutting edge, I thought, way ahead of Vogue magazine and all these simple American giants. No, but it's a pleasure to see people doing what they like to do, and I think Iman's an example to us all. You know, I've learned since I've retired that I have to get more work than I can. I've also got 3 jobs.
Absolutely. Andiswa, you, of course, also have done a lot of work as a model. You've done ramp work. You were, you know, immediately thrown into the international spotlight. You got to travel. This thing of doing more than one thing, even whilst you're modeling, getting into the business, is, of course, not just an issue for black models. It's an issue for everybody in the industry. But for models, in terms of diversity, it's obviously there's added pressure.
Absolutely, there is. As she said, you don't earn a lot. You cannot depend on the modeling as a career on its own. When I was a model, I remember very well when I came back from New York, reality hit me, and I realized that I can actually I can't survive on this thing alone. I have to, you know, venture out. But I was so in love with the industry, which is why I then, you know, I stuck into the industry. I got into production, into making decisions, and it's something that I would tell every young girl out there, because there's a lot of young women that want to be models. They think it's overnight success. They want to just see themselves on the magazines, and it's.
In fact, that's where I want to bring you in, Iman. I mean, you have studied. And you have given back, you have gone into business. What are the tips? What are the you know, lessons that you've learned? Because this has also got to do with having a very limited lifespan. What is the message to other young women, particularly diverse women, in terms of just getting into this business, but also not putting all your eggs into one basket?
I always say be authentic. There's so many different people on this earth, but there's only one person. You can only be one person and be yourself in doing all of that, especially with moving into social media. Modeling has transitioned into social media. People aren't buying magazines and editorials, so it's more social media, more getting into the digital. We're moving into the 4th industrial revolution, so we actually just have to move into digitalization.
There you have it. Thank you so very much, Iman and Andiswa. Peter, thank you. And that, of course, wraps it up for us this week. You've had your fix. We'll see you again next Sunday.